For this video I'm going to do something a little bit different. We're not going to be tying up a fly. Really want to show a technique, and the technique is typically referred to as the bent wing technique. I've got a size 14 just to make it a little bit more visible dry fly hook here in my vise. I'm just going to start some black nano silk. Most commonly when I use this technique, I use it on a dry fly, a mayfly most commonly, or baetis. I have used it for caddis patterns before, and often when you do a wing on one of these baetis mayfly patterns, sometimes you'll use the tips of a couple of hackle, whether it's grizzly or a dun hackle. Sometimes you'll use like mallard wing feathers, just clumps of it cut out. I've always found that a little bit difficult to get the wings just quite right, and this technique from my perspective creates a really good looking wing. And although it may look difficult, I'm going to step you through it, and it's really not that hard. And I found that these wings are actually a little bit more durable than especially the tippets or the tips on a hackle feather. So just as tradition on a mayfly would be, or a baetis, I'm going to start out with the tails. Again, I'm not tying a fly, but because I usually start these patterns out with the tails and then put the wing on, I wanted to go ahead and do it that way. So we're going to go ahead and take our thread back to about the hook point where the barb of the hook is. I'm going to take it a few wraps forward. For this one, I'm just going to use some micro fibettes. We'll pretend we're doing a dun, maybe a pale morning dun. I want those to be about the length of the shank of the hook here, so I'll take that measurement and pinch right up here at the eye, and then I move my fingers back to where the bend of the hook is. I'll set them slightly to my side of the hook as I tie them down, and the thread tension will typically pull those back over the top so that they're centered over the top, and we'll just go ahead and secure those down back to the bend of the hook. Sorry, my fingers are dry, so I catch my thread and it probably looks horrible on film. Sorry. So we'll get that back to just about that point. And then I bring my thread back forward. We'll go ahead and grab our scissors. It's down tight enough I don't have to worry about those slipping out. And just cut off the butt ends. And with that, we'll just go ahead and move our thread back up. And I like this at about the 3/4 point, somewhere about there, to tie my wings in. Now, most commonly when I'm tying one of these bent wing patterns, I turn to one of two different feathers. One is a Hungarian Partridge feather. Of course, you strip off all of that nice fuzzy stuff at the bottom, or I'll use a Mallard flank feather. I like turning to this one a little bit more just because the fibers are incredibly long, so it's a little bit easier to make it. So we're going to use the Mallard flank feather today. So we start out, we've got the really fuzzy bits here on the bottom, nice long fibers at the top. So to start the process, I will just go ahead and strip the fuzzies off the bottom. So I'm really left with just the bare stem, and I try to make that as even as I can. So we're left with the feather kind of looking just about like that, with a nice handle at the bottom. So next I just grab the feather by that stem. I'm going to grab it up here by the tip with my thumb and middle finger. I'm just going to start stroking some of these fibers backwards. You'll see on the Mallard flank that those fibers are fairly long. And I want to get about an equal number on either side, so you can kind of see that starting to happen here. And once I have them pretty well separated out, I'm left with the tip exposed like that. Sorry, this is the gross part. I'm just going to stick this in my mouth like that. It's going to sharpen them up. And what I use for a tool here, very simple tool, is just a nozzle from one of my UV resins. And you can see I've clipped the tip of it off to give me a little bit of a wider opening on that nozzle. And I'm just going to take that tip of the feather and I'm going to put it into the nozzle. You'll see it come out this other end. Then I'm going to just begin pulling on it. You can see the tip coming out. And this is why it's called the bent wing, is because as I pull it, you'll see that gap where I stroke those fibers back, transitioning right there into those longer fibers being bent backwards. So that's really all there is to it. But when I'm tying one of these, I usually like the feather bent upwards just like this. I keep it in the nozzle, and then I'm going to, right at the base of that nozzle, I'm going to take my thread around. I'm going to pull it fairly tight, which I can do with this nano silk. And I'm just going to begin taking wraps back towards the bend of the hook to kind of secure this down in place. And once you have it nice and secure, you can go ahead and just pull the nozzle out. And then I'm just going to turn to my scissors. I'm going to pull all of this back and sneak in with my scissors and clip it off nice and close. With that done, you can see it's turned a little bit off center. I'll just go ahead and turn it back on center. The tension of my thread is probably going to end up pulling it back a little bit, so I like to get on the hook shank a little bit. I may take some wraps back here. This is nano silk, so it would take about 1,000 wraps to get this to the same height as that wing. But then I'll go ahead and just wrap back up on the wing, pulling it nice and tight. Then I'm just going to take my thumbnail, and this is pretty durable, like I said, so I can pull it pretty good. I'm going to pull it back, and I'm going to take my thumbnail and kind of crease right at the base of that feather, and that's going to help that stand straight up. And once I've got that standing straight up, I'm going to transfer my thread to the front of the wing. I'm just going to take some traditional jam wraps right underneath of that feather to help it stand up. So now we just have that feather sticking up, the tips that we wetted are sticking straight up, and the fibers that we've bent are tied onto the shank of our hook. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a hold of those tip feathers, a few of them in each hand, and I'm just going to start pulling them apart, and that's going to split that wing right down the center. And we're left with this nice kind of owl looking thing where the tips of the feathers are kind of still in place. I'm just going to turn my vise a little bit so I have a good look at it. I'm going to clip those tips off, one on each side. And at the end of the day, that's really all there is to it. You can see it makes a beautiful set of wings on the pattern, and again, like I said, they're very durable, so I can kind of push them back pretty hard, get them standing straight up a little bit better, maybe get them facing each other a little bit better without having them break apart or anything. Now if you want to ensure that they're separated, you can take a wrap back behind them, take a wrap up through the middle of them. Now you're in front of them, take another wrap across the other side, and these are just called figure 8 wraps, and you can take a few of those just to help keep them separated a little bit. And then once again you can monkey around with them, kind of push them together, push them back. I manhandle them sometimes when because usually on a pattern like this I'm going to do maybe a super fine dubbing body up to about here. I'm going to kind of clean up that that edge there and make it more of a ramp, more tapered. I'll tie in my hackle. I'll maybe dub it with a little bit more of the dubbing up to right in front of the wings, leaving a little space for the eyes. And then as I'm wrapping the hackle, I'm going to take those wraps behind those wings, and as I transition in front of them, I'll just take a hold of them, because they are durable, pull them back a little bit, get that wrap right in front, and then let them go. So I've taken some time to kind of show you the process, but really it takes little time at all, and ends up with these gorgeous wings. So I hope you find this helpful. I hope you venture to try the bent wing. Again, it's not that difficult. This is a mallard flank. I'll use the Hungarian Partridge. Sometimes I venture off into some other feather colors, like on a pheasant, where you get some really cool looking, cool colored and textured feathers. But most commonly, these are the two I turn to. I don't think the fish really pay that much attention to the difference in the texture or anything, but I want that wing to be sitting up above the hackle. So grab yourself a hook and throw it in your vise and give the bent wing a try.